It's Wednesday night. I hope you got your big boy pants on.
Nice. Look at this. We already got people in here.
Yeah, we're already live. And it's been a rough week. I've been sick for the past couple of days. Shane's is starting to catch it now.
Yeah.
This is the real pandemic, right? So
Right.
but we got John Wilburn was in here first, huh? David James, and then I chimed in saying third just to say, what the heck, you guys are already in here? I hadn't even got here yet. And then Dean Stevenson's in here. Fab Race Mon Repeat. Chris Cox out of Northeast Dragway.
Nice.
Clint Street Machines.
Hello.
I'll tell you something interesting. Clint shot me an email and left a message here on my phone in the office that I guess there's a hot rod hoarder that passed away somewhere near him in Knoxville area.
Ooh.
And he sent me this email, had a link to all the stuff this guy had hoarded over the years. And he was obviously a Ford guy, right? But there was a lot of stuff there. And there was a couple things that caught my eye. Like I found a whole front end from a truck on one of them.
Nice.
But there was a 64 5 El Camino that was just kind of rusted and beat. And I'm like, man, what I wouldn't give to make one of those into like a Buick Skylark El Camino.
Right.
Oh yeah. Just have something totally off the wall and then throw like a V6 Buick in it. But just interesting, make people think about what it is. But
yeah.
Scarlett, the 4-eyed Cuda is here. It says, I've been sick for a week and a half. Well, welcome to the club, bud. I'm feeling pretty beat myself. Let's see.
Michael Schmidt.
Two Hacks Jeff is in the house.
Yeah.
Showing some checkered flags. Michael Schmidt, hello from SoCal with Flathead Plymouth 66666. And then I got an indication from YouTube telling me that we're live. So thanks, YouTube. Ed's Machine is in the house. So and Ed is a machine shop by trade for real. So if you're in the Arkansas area and you need to get some machine work done, hit up Ed at Ed's Machine. Let's see here. Mohawk 62. Hello, everyone.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Hey, Michael Schmidt, whereabouts in SoCal? I just left that. I'm kind of getting some SoCal blues right now. You know,
are you really? Is there such a thing?
Yeah, you know why? I maybe it was because it was just YouTube. I was going across some YouTube videos of people riding their sport bikes and supermotos, you know, and I sold all that stuff before when I came out here, and I saw some of them going on the Ortez Highway, you know, where they're going from Lake Elsinore, they go to the coast, you know.
All right,
yeah. And then some people were on the 94, and I was just like, man, you know, I do miss that kind of stuff.
What you don't miss though is like filling up at a gas station.
Everything else.
Yeah. I mean, I miss the Mexican food, but it can be replaced.
Oh, right? You know, you took me to a place out there in Murfreesboro.
Yeah. It's not bad. You don't want to go in there a lot because you'll be poor. It's not like Southern California where you get the burrito for $5, but
yeah, it's not like that.
And that's because they got 900,000 other shops that are, you know, Frank DeBerto's and they're all making the same burrito. But this place in Murfreesboro, they got no one to compete against, right? So,
yeah, no. And then we have a place here in there's actually two kind of by where I live. There's one in Oakland, Tennessee, and it's called like Tacos. I believe it's just called Tacos. And then there's another place off of Cooper Street in Memphis, in like by the Cooper Young area, and it's called Maria's Tortas and Tacos, and that place is legit. It's actually really good.
Cool. I was like my favorite thing in Memphis is the barbecue pulled pork sandwiches that you can get that are like, they got this coleslaw on them and stuff like that. Oh God, dude.
Yeah. But you know what? I got to tell you, me and Lisa were actually just talking about this. I think it was yesterday or the day before. We didn't grow up with barbecue all the time. So it was bitching when I first moved here. I was like, yes, let's go out and try it. And I was super excited. I'm over it. You know what I mean? To me, there's nothing better than going and getting just an awesome taco. I could have a taco or burrito 3 or 4 times a week and be cool with it, you know?
So, well, that was me in SoCal. It's probably why I'm diabetic now. I don't know. Frank Park says, hello from Somerville, Georgia. Did someone say hoarder?
Right.
Your ears must be burning, Frank. Let's see. Backwoods Custom Crap saying evening gearheads. And let's see. Clint Street Machines has said be right back. So maybe Clint's going to go get the flyer for this thing. Terrence Seymour, all the way from the underside of the world.
Wow.
And then Aaron Germanson here is aloha, freezing rain and snow all night. School is canceled tomorrow already. Well, we got lucky. It was literally like 80 degrees here today. It was a freaking gorgeous day. And if I haven't said this before, the best season in Tennessee is by far fall.
Right now.
By far. Oh, it's gorgeous weather. It'll be 40 when you wake up. 80 is a high, humidity's low, and it's like you can get so much stuff done. And but when winter hits, you'll just walk outside one day and it'll be 29 outside and it doesn't get above 50.
In fact, we're getting that like tonight's 50 something, and then tomorrow's like 30, and then the next day it's 28 degrees.
Yep. And then I think we're gonna say goodbye to fall.
Yeah.
But I think there's one more last hurrah in there because I got a lot of stuff left to do. I finally just got done with the racing season this past weekend over Northeast Dragway. There was quite a few folks that came out there just from the Wednesday night tech talk to say hi. So I appreciate y'all stopping by and saying hi and shaking me down in the booth. But I thought that was cool. I mean, Shane and I really had no idea how big our audience really was or where it spans. And we talk about it every week. Like, hey, how many people were viewing this week? But it was kind of interesting to see people actually pop up at the booth that were like, hey, we watch you guys on Wednesday. I love your show. Like, thanks.
Awesome. Well, thanks, man. Yeah. We do this just for you guys, honestly, just to keep the community going.
Blake from Bad Trees here saying, I can't get unsick. It's been a month now.
Right.
It's probably because you bought an SRT4.
Oh,
that's probably what it is. It's sucking the life right out of you.
Oh, that's terrible. Dude, I wanted one of those cars so badly.
Oh, really?
Yeah, dude. Because I really like that. God, I'll admit it, man. I just enjoy the really. I had a Volkswagen Bug, so the 4-cylinder, high horse, power type of, winding really high. I'm a motorcycle guy. I mean, I enjoy my V8s. Don't get me wrong, and everything else, but there's just something to be said about something that's like a K series Honda or SRT4 that just gets it done, man. I love it.
Well, the SRT4 is a neon.
It's a SRT4, but yes, it is a neon with a styling package, but it's got a
turbocharged neon,
turbocharged, and man, they get it. They make like 300, 400 horsepower.
Jonathan Couch, he's bringing up a good point here. He's saying, just switch my role at work. I'm working more overtime, not trying to be political or anything. Grow a large garden next year. So I think that's what I'm going to have to do.
Yeah.
I've come to the conclusion that I had to look at Tennessee and see what was the indigenous crops here that would grow really well. Right. And I found that
corn, tobacco.
And I'm thinking I might grow some and then just barter with it because somebody who smokes or chews, what they would do for that. Like, oh, I'll give you a chicken and a bull. Okay.
Yeah, we have a lot of corn around here, believe it or not, too. So corn seems to grow really well around here.
Yeah, you're still in the Midwest, my man. Corn grows off of the side of a tree if you let it. Let's see. Richard Bucket says he's hitting Rhode Island, 70 GS. Dude, nice. Well, I tell you what, Rhode Island was that's the little state that does it, right? I mean, I've been up there, I think, 2 times. 2 times in the Northeast I've ever been up there. And every time I go up there, this time of year, it is freaking amazing.
Yeah.
It is unbelievable. It's like the days are nicer than in Tennessee, which is, in my opinion, I don't know how it's possible. But it just looks so picturesque because it got a lot of the broadleaf trees and not so many pines, right? So,
yeah, today I was driving the Dart. I took a Lizard King out to TCI today, Ashland, Mississippi, and it was like 80 degrees and the leaves are falling. They're all over the road. It was like Like it was like a movie.
Yeah, you should have shot a commercial of the Lizard King, man.
Right, all slow-mo, you know what I mean?
Well, you could have been you and the Bullet, and then you just crop out the guys in the Charger, and you just put the Lizard King in there, right?
Right, that'd be funny. That'd be a good one.
Yeah. Well, there's the wife. She's saying she loves the Pilgrim hats. I went out of my way and put those on there today.
So awesome.
Let's see. Jonathan Couch, he's wanting to know, Shane, did you see DV's videos about camshaft valve events?
Who's DV?
David Vizard.
No, I haven't.
No, go watch it because it's his math on how to determine the ideal camshaft.
Okay.
So he gives you the Lowbuck way, his basic math on how to do a camshaft. I can't remember, was it 128 something, 128? I think that's what it's called.
David
Vizard, Vizard.
David Vizard. Let's take a look. I'll go ahead and keep on going. I'm going to David Vizard Performance.
Yep, that's him. Let's see.
Okay.
John Wilburn says California doesn't have barbecue. I never had Tennessee barbecue that was any count either. I don't know. I just like barbecue, but Memphis has its own thing going on with pulled pork sandwiches.
Yes,
and they are pretty damn delicious, I have to say.
But you know, me and the wife, we lived here for 2 years now, and we've actually got it down pat. And believe it or not, it comes out really good out of a crock pot, like incredibly good. And
Yeah.
I would put it up against a lot of these places here around here that serve it, and it's really good.
Well, when I was living in Mississippi, they had this place called the Shed. You used to get fed at the Shed, right? And it was literally a building made out of garbage. And you would go in there and they had pulled pork, or you could actually get whatever you wanted barbecue. But man, was that place fantastic. It was on exit 57 on I-10. It was the bomb, man.
Yeah.
But yeah, every time we drive through there, when the government would have me transfer them from one place to the next, we'd always stop and get fed at the Shed every time. So
that's awesome.
Let's see here.
Hey, Dizzy Izzy's here.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say there's Memphis barbecue has got something about it. Why do you think Fat Elvis became Fat Elvis? Right. I mean,
right. It's pork. Yeah, that's right.
Okay. John Wilburn says he's been working outside all week, got a few days left before Mother Nature takes a big frosty dump on all of us. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Let's see. Oh man, Jason Fitch is saying raining and cold in Phoenix.
Yeah, they actually
finally showed.
Yeah, they it literally is crazy dumping rain over there. I've seen a lot of my friends on Facebook. They're just getting killed out there with rain this whole week, last weekend, and these days.
Oh, so wow. Blake's justifying his SRT4 here. It's really fun. People that hate fun wouldn't understand.
It is fun. I'm telling you, they're really badass, man.
So Jonathan Couch is saying, I've been feeling sick for a couple of days, but I take vitamins daily, vitamins 2, multivitamins, and allergy medicine daily. Makes me feel better and have my prosthetic stump heal up. Okay, well, dude, keep taking the vitamins, man. Maybe it'll grow back, whatever is prosthetic on you.
That's right.
Yeah, but I take my vitamins every day. I do vitamin C every day, and not in a pill. I do the packet thing, so it's like 10,000 milligrams of vitamin C, and then I do a tablespoon of honey in my morning tea, and then that's pretty much how I fight it off. But I've been doing pretty good with it. I made it 2 years into the COVID deal before I ended up with it. So, but all right, let's see. Okay, Michael Schmidt, love UTG, but really appreciate your specific, detailed, and practical discussion more. You guys are great. Thanks for sharing. No problem, Michael. I'm glad you appreciate the show.
Yeah.
And we're not trying to one up on Tony or anything like that. We just wanted to continue on as was, just because we felt it did the community a good thing. When Shane and I were talking, they were like, oh, we can't leave on a note like this. Come on, let's just pick up the ball and run with it.
And neither one of us think we're like experts by any means. We just have a stupid amount of dumb knowledge about stupid cars and random stuff. So that's why we just try to share it.
I read a lot.
Yeah.
And I was poor a lot, and I'm probably still poor a lot. And like what they say, through adversity comes greatness. And you never saw anybody that had something handed to them their whole life do something great, right?
That's correct.
Now, I ended up doing a lot of junkyard sessions. I had to hot rod with junk because that's all I could afford. I mean, literally, I've been on my own. I've lived at home, up till I joined the Navy, but my parents gave me $0 for anything. I had to buy anything I wanted.
Me too.
That was from 13 years old on. And so I had a job, and I've been working pretty much since I was 13 and hustling and trying to turn a buck here and there. And I know what it's like to be everybody else.
Yep. I did the same thing. I had a paper route. I used to mow lawns, and I used to change oil. I did the same thing.
Let's see here. Oh man, I've jumped really far forward.
Wow. We are far behind.
Yeah. Okay. I think the new channel is David Vizard Performance, is old one. Oh, okay. So they're saying just David Vizard is his new channel.
Yeah, I think I found the one.
Vizard is the correct pronunciation of it.
It's David Vizard's infamous 128 cam spec formula. Is that the one that I'm supposed to look at? Okay. Yep. I'll save it up here and I'll watch it later.
David Vizard Performance is the old channel. David Vizard is the new channel. Shane, he's the guy who wrote the essay books on porting and horsepower and such. Yeah, I know you know this guy because he's the guy that wrote the book How to Hot Rod a Small Block Chevrolet, and almost every single gearhead bought that sucker.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it sounds familiar. I just didn't know what the DV stood for, and then, but yeah, the Vizard. Yeah, it's once I see him, I saw him. I was like, oh yeah, I know this guy. Oh yeah.
Let's see. Let's see if we can find a question here. Is there any tech questions? Let's see. Leighton Welding saying it's going to be cold, but I'm going to try and get the Aspen on stands and pick up the 440.
Nice.
Yeah. I think he's working on an Aspen wagon, I believe.
What year? 79, something like that? 77?
I don't remember it. My parents had one when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Dude, it was the weirdest thing I'd ever seen. It was a wagon.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like legit Aspen wagon, white with white interior. And you're going to throw your wife and kids in that thing, right? Well, you can imagine how the interior looked after we just walked by it.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it's already brown and black and the smeared stuff and spilled Kool-Aid. Because this is the 80s. This is when people drank Kool-Aid because it was the affordable thing. And my dad I remember looking at it, I was helping him wash the car on the weekend, and I had the doors open, shaking his head like, I can't stand this. This is breaking my heart, right? And so he traded it in just because we were like messing the interior up, and he just felt bad about it.
Wow.
Yeah. So we went and got like a 76 Chevette or something for it. Oh.
Oh, he's saying, yeah. Go ahead.
Here, is that what you're talking about?
I was actually it's a 79 Aspen 2-door, not a wagon, is what he was saying.
2-door. Oh, I thought somebody was doing a wagon. I could have swore it was Leighton was doing a wagon. But okay, I'm sorry. I got you confused with another channel. Oh, wait, I think this is his in his picture. He's the one that's got that looks like the Roadrunner one.
Yeah, like a 79. Yeah, I know exactly what that looks like because they had the Aspen, then they had that Roadrunner version of it.
Right, which was like a petty blue one.
Yeah.
Is that it?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Well, John Wilburn says, when I was 16, I worked in the mailroom at Bluefield College and was a mobile mechanic for the campus. That's cool. I didn't do the mobile mechanic thing. I was the go-to guy on the Navy base. That if you wanted because when I joined the Navy is in 94, right? So we're only 7 years into everything having fuel injection.
Yep.
And so that would mean you had an 8-year-old car or older, which was almost every squid in the Navy, right? Mm-hmm. Like they didn't buy anything new because they didn't have any money.
Yep.
So they bought these clapped out junk cars. And here we are in California that mandated everyone has to have a smog. And you couldn't get a base pass unless you had a smog, a
Yep.
passing car with a smog. So I was the guy to go to if you had a carbureted car, if you wanted to get it past smog.
Yeah.
I used to, man, I didn't make a lot of money. I did $20 a job, and I would pretty much just work nonstop all weekend, every weekend if I didn't have duty, rejetting carbs, cleaning them up, putting new gaskets in, new accelerator pumps, tuning cars up, setting the timing, putting plugs in them. And that was all the basic stuff I was doing in it, but it was like so repetitive every weekend, right?
Yep.
And I made good money off of it, but I also didn't spend any because the government was giving 3 meals a day and a place to sleep. So it was not a bad deal.
Yeah. I had kind of the same deal where I lived at in Poway. There's all hills. Everybody either went up from Ramona down or up. And there was before they had Scripps Fire Parkway, you had to go up Poway Road. And that was a big windy 2-lane road. And it's a really 6% grade. So I was doing breaks literally every weekend. So people would just drop off their keys on Friday night in my mailbox, and I would have their cars out front, and I would just on Friday night I would take them apart, I get the parts ordered, and then I'd put them all back together, and I'd put their receipt in the mailbox, and they just drop me a check, and that was that.
Oh, it's cool. You didn't even have to see them.
No, they would just call me up. Hey, we dropped the car off. Okay.
Aaron Germanson says, question, any insider information like tips on epic Black Friday sales? I'm looking for a deal on a Hemi 6 ignition or MSD 6 Hemi ignition.
I would go to like eBay. I think I saw one of these things on eBay.
No, I know. Okay. After Black Friday, like you can look on Black Friday and probably find something. And I'll bet you the places that I would look would be like your normal places maybe the not so normal places. Most gearhead hot rodders that are into drag racing go over to Summit or Jags, right? Mm-hmm. Hit Speedway Motors. Speedway's probably got some kind of deal going. And they do a lot of stock car roundy round, but they support all this other stuff too. And then you got competition products. And then I'll bet you Chris Cox from Fab Race Mon Repeat, it's on here. He owns a speed shop called Speed Oasis LLC. And I'll bet you Chris can probably get us some kind of deal on it. So if you want to get in touch with him, Aaron, he can probably hook you up. He is an MSD dealer, I'm sure of it. The other thing is Amazon. Amazon on, was it Monday? It's not Friday. It's like Monday. It's like
Cyber Monday is what they call it.
Cyber Monday.
Yep.
All right. Get on there, find your ignition box. It'll definitely be on Amazon somewhere, right? Cyber Monday, they will probably cut the rug out from under that sucker.
Yeah.
And that's where I'd be trying to snipe those deals.
Absolutely.
Let's see here. Any questions, though? We haven't got any tech questions. It's hard to have tech talk if you don't have any tech questions.
Yeah. I'll expand a little bit on what I was talking to you earlier about that carburetor that I've been kind of fighting. I don't use the word fighting, but just tuning. I had that thing all tuned up and ready, and it was going great on that 600. I did drag week on it. It ran beautifully. I monitored the wideband front and rear the whole time. And then in my last video 2 weeks ago, I cut all the holes out, so it's an open plenum. And then I added an 1.5 inch spacer, and I was going to just do a, oh, wait.
I'll let you finish your story, though.
Okay. But yeah, so it was, I put the 600 back on it, and man, it was out of whack, like completely. And this is actually my first time putting an open hole spacer and an actual riser on a, say, a 6-cylinder. That's something that has, a very wide distribution type of intake manifold. And I didn't think it would make as big of a difference as it has. I've had to change the jets almost 12 to 14% in different directions to even it out. And it's running good now, but basically I had to take all my specs, put it right back to stock, and then slowly start to move it incrementally back in the different directions. Cause it was I basically took a great running carburetor, put it on there. And then all of a sudden now it just was like, whoa, this thing's like almost undrivable.
Yeah,
So
but you got it dialed in though, right?
oh, it's dialed in now. Yeah, I took it to TCI today, and it ran beautifully. It's
Is
you
it
know 14.
peppier and
Yeah, it's hard to say because it's got 276 gear in it. So, but it's the air fuels are good. It's running right at 14.2 and it's cruising down the road at 2,500. And it seems to be when you're flooring it really good. The Holly two barrel, because there's so much vacuum through that, it's really easy to tune. You basically two jets and a power valve, and you're done. But the Edelbrock, that's because it's a four barrel, has got so much more pressure drop when you floor it. There's the air just stalls. It's almost like, and then it slowly builds up.
well, is this your first time using the Edelbrock though too?
No, I put it on for the duct tape drags last year, and basically haven't touched it since then. And I just did a last little tune up before drag week, so it's been on there for about a year. But this time right now is the first time that I've been driving it since I poured it out the head, the intake manifold, and added the spacer. And I only added the spacer so that way it was easier when I put the Holly on it. It
Uh-huh.
was just easier to put the Holly on at that point because then I was just a spacer. So you just take the four barrel off and then put the Holly on it that had a two barrel adapter to it. And that's the only reason why I did it. But when I drove the Holly around, it was I went up and down the street, a couple jets, and that was that. But the 600 was much harder, and it was really out of whack compared to what it was before. But then again, because it was a four hole, I had different jets in the back. I had a leaner jet on the right hand side, a fatter jet on the secondary on the back side, because it's got to go a longer distance. And then same with the metering rods. There were two different metering rods with two different jets, so it took a little longer to tune in. And now you're not really having to tune all four corners like you did before. It's basically front and rear, so it's much more like how a carburetor should be tuned. It
Right. And I
seems
think
like.
that's probably because what is happening is it's moving away from those runners, right?
Exactly. That's
And
correct.
because I think the runners were so close, you're getting false indications of what fuel and air you need on just that. It'd be the passenger side of the carburetor,
Yep.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's pulling through those two barrels different than it's pulling through those far two barrels.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably what you're seeing is that now it's evened out
Yes.
and you're getting a smoother transition between all those six runners, even though that's the thing I always hated about the Slant 6 is like, I think what would be better is if you had a log style manifold, right?
Right.
And all the runners were the same length.
Yeah.
Because
Something.
it makes it goofy there in the center with those two center ports being almost straight, and then every single one kind of angles around, they curve
Get
and get
worse and worse
longer
and
and
worse.
longer and longer.
Yeah. And then what's even worse too is that the outer ones are exposed to much more heat, so the fuel then vaporizes. So it's a whole different deal. Yeah. So you'll take the two plugs on, like, say 3 and 4, and it'll be fat, and then the other ones will be almost white, and you're like, what's going on here? When my first
Yeah.
time messing with the Slant 6,
I think your EFI is going to open your eyes up to something really amazing, because that's where it's going to make the hugest difference.
yeah,
You can dial each individual cylinder to be exactly what it needs to be.
exactly. And that's
But
that's my next step. But I'm going to go to a throttle body, and then I'm going to go to the multi-port.
right. Well, Clint Street Machine saying, question. So if you and Shane are serious about sleeping outdoors for PRI, I might be willing to share my hotel room. Clint, don't worry about it. We're not literally going to be sleeping outdoors. We're going to go camping, but we're taking my travel trailer up there and parking the thing. And we're going to have the lap of luxury on as much as lap of luxury as you can have on a 21-foot travel trailer. But
With 3 dudes.
yeah, with 3 dudes, and we'll probably be like, virtually living within each other's 3-foot personal space.
Right.
But it's just for a couple of days, and it doesn't really matter because we won't be spending much time there just sleeping.
Yeah. Yeah.
As long as it's warm, has a shower, and can make some food, I think we'll be okay.
Yeah.
So,
But
but I
thanks for
do
the offer. I
appreciate
really
you
appreciate
doing
it.
that.
Yeah.
And
Thank you.
I will be calling you tomorrow, Clint, about the Horde. I need to. There is a truck there I need to get, because right now I want to say the high bid on it's $120, and I need the entire front end off of it.
Yeah.
So let's see here. Okay, Leighton Welding saying, what size carb would you recommend for a stock 440?
Stock 440. Well, size carburetor, it would be two different ones. If it's going to be an Edelbrock, I would go with the 750. If it's going to be a Holly, I would go with the 650 for a stock carb, because they rate them differently slightly. One's flowed with just air, one's flowed with air and fuel. If it's something that you're going to be driving around and non-racing, but actually driving it, the Edelbrock would be much better for that. It's going to be easier to tune, and basically you can just how do they used to say, set it and forget it. That's pretty much what's going to be with the 750. I had a 750 Edelbrock on my pretty much stock 440 in my truck. It just had a 6-pack cam in it and a dual plane, and it ran beautifully. You'll like it.
Me personally, I'll tell you what, if it's a stock 440, that means it's going to have a stock cam in it. It's going to have good vacuum signal. There's nothing wrong with the thermoquad. There's nothing wrong with quadrajet on that thing. They will work great. Those carburetors, that's the thing that people don't understand about those carburetors. Just like the Edelbrock version of the AFB, or even their ABS. The stronger the vacuum signal that you have, the more efficient the carburetor works.
Yeah. Right? The problem is, though, that I agree with you, but most people aren't going to find a good rebuildable carburetor nowadays in the wrecking yard.
Oh, no, those are long gone. You need to pick them up at like a swap meet most of the time if you can find one.
And those are still going to be questionable, because they're going to be gone through, picked apart, whatever. It's going to be, I got a box of carburetors I'm going to sell. He's probably wanting something that he can just buy and put on and drive without hunting down, little parts. But yes, the thermoquad would work great. I used to have a few of those things, but in the move, I've lost all that stuff.
I got quadrajets out the wazoo. If you need one, give me a call. Let's see. Jonathan Couchy says, Shane, if you're not running a Slant at 18-to-1 air fuel ratio, you aren't running it. Actually, my brother and I slapped a late 80s V8 lean burn computer when his Slant 6.1 died, and it runs perfect mid-20s on the highway.
Yeah, that's what I get. I wasn't. Mine doesn't seem to like the 18-to-1. It's probably because of the cam and the compression and the flow on it. It really wants to be right around 14.1, 13.8 when it's cruising. Anything leaner than that, I mean, I've tried vacuum advance. I've tried, I'm running almost 45 total degrees of timing when I'm just doing part throttle. I'm getting about 24 miles of the gallon out of it. So it runs good. But anything lower than that, it just
spark knocks.
It spark knocks.
Yep. Well, that's because of the small bore and the long stroke. Those two together are a recipe for spark knock.
That's correct.
Yeah, and generally the other thing that goes along with that is, like, if the piston sits any further than, like, say 40 thousandths down the hole, spark knock central, right? I mean, look at your Ford modified 400s or 400 Clevelands, or however you wanted to look at it. That's what killed them, was spark knock, and they had low compression, but the piston sat 60 to 80 to 100 thousandths in the hole.
Yeah, mine's 120 thousandths in the hole.
And that's your typical for Slant. I knew they were in there pretty far.
Yeah.
So Michael Schmidt's asking, what are some free or low buck tips to prep a low horsepower old 50s car for local drag race nights with the idea of improving time slips each night? Oh man, you are in the right house.
That's right.
I'm talking low horsepower V8 that if you don't throw a bucket load of money at it, it's never going to run like everyone else. Well, I'm going to tell you something right now. You don't want it to run like everyone else. You want it to run like a well-tuned 50s hot rod.
That's right.
And the idea here is, you're not going to be making mega horsepower. You're not going to be making mega torque. But the ideal situation for this kind of car, one, weight transfer. Get every pony that you have to the ground.
That's right.
Okay. So if that means you got to buy a decent set of tires for drag racing. I mean, I don't know what kind of power this thing's making, and I don't know what it is, and you haven't really said. But if you kind of just throw them all in the mix and you say it's going to be somewhere from about 260 to 320 cubic inches, and it's going to, let's say, make 200 to 290 horsepower gross, right? It could be a 4-barrel or a 2-barrel or 3 2-barrels in the 50s. So the best thing to do is get every pony to the ground. If you can, if it has a Ford Cruise-O-Matic in it, or a GM Power Glide, or a Buick Dynaflow, or if you can take that out and put a 3-speed in it, that's probably your biggest bang for the buck without spending another dollar.
Yeah.
Let's throw 3 gears at it, and it'd be even better if you could just find one with an overdrive and throw a 4-speed at it with an automatic, or like automatic overdrive and change that rear end gear, and to get it to dig.
Start taking some weight out of the car too.
That's another cheap way to do it, is take some weight out. The other one used to be pull the front sway bar off. Ditch the accessory drives that you don't need to run. If it's got air conditioning, lose that pulley and belt.
That's right.
If it's got power steering, lose that sucker. Buy yourself a short belt just to run the water pump and the alternator. And if you want, the alternators, it doesn't have to go, right?
Just put it on a switch.
Put it on a switch and kill that sucker when you go up there to make a pass. When you get done making a pass, turn it back on.
That's right.
Let's see.
I have that on my car.
Lose the air cleaner on it. No matter what, you're going to pick up. And you're also money best spent is do a good tune-up on the thing. Make sure the points are gapped properly. You got a good cap with brass terminals on it. You have a good set of plug wires that are not ratty and spark knocking and arcing in between the exhaust ports, and plug gap. Okay, on a stock motor, if it's got only, say, if it's a 50s motor, it probably would say 8.5 to 1 compression. Isn't that where they kind of started, right around there?
Yeah.
That spark gap, you can creep on it some. Okay, so normally they'll tell you 35 thousandths is where you need to be for your points ignition. Well, that's for it to run 30,000 miles flawlessly without doing anything. Going drag racing, the bigger the gap you got, the more power it's going to make. So
because it's dwell on the coil.
So the big one is open that gap up, try 40 thousandths first, and see how it does. It doesn't have enough cylinder pressure to generally blow that spark out. And that's the thing you're going to be fighting the most. But if you open it up some, it'd probably be, I bet you'd probably see it on a time slip.
Oh, yeah. You'd see it in the 60 foot, maybe in the 100, in the 330, because it'd build more torque.
It should.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That's the big one, is get you out of the hole.
Yeah. You time for torque, carburetor for horsepower.
Yeah, and the funny thing is that those 50s cars, people look at them kind of like, they were anemic by the 60s muscle cars days. Yeah, but 1980s cars were worse. So
right.
If they can make an 80s car runs good, you use the same principle on that 50s car, right? And what they did there was like Shane was saying, some of the Fairmonts came with aluminum bumpers.
Yeah,
from the factory, right? And that way they could keep the weight down, so that you had your anemic 302 that made 140 horsepower could get the thing down the road.
Yeah.
But those are some of the basic tricks. Try a couple more degrees of timing. If she starts knocking,
back it back down.
Either put some better fuel in it or back it back down.
And before you put the new plugs in it, take it out for a drive, get it hot, and don't just pour water in it, but get some distilled water and run it through the carburetor, very slowly, very little, but that'll take some of the carbon off of it, so that way it's less prone to spark knock.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's a big one too. Yep. If you can get rid of some of that carbon that's built up over the years, unless it's been freshly rebuilt. If it's freshly rebuilt, I'm assuming it's not. I'm thinking it's probably, just going with your question here, I'm thinking it's still a running 50s car.
Yeah.
So Shane's right. It probably will have some carbon built up on the backside of the valves, because let's see, valve seals back then. I don't think even Chevrolets had valve seals.
Yeah, the umbrella. Yeah, it was an umbrella.
And I think Buicks didn't run any. Nailheads didn't have any.
Yeah.
And so I'm sure some of the other 50s cars didn't have any either.
Yeah, so it's going to be on that exhaust valve 100%.
Yeah, you're going to have carbon on there for sure.
Mm-hmm.
That'll
definitely help.
All right. Quick suspension question from Dust Devil Garage. Do you think I'm going to have traction problems with the rake on my car? I have super stock springs. The tires are 31, 16, 5 slicks. I worry about weight transfer.
Yeah.
He's got this 80s style stink bug stance is what he's got going on.
Oh, is that what it is?
With these slicks sticking out.
Mm.
Okay. You can get away with that on a low horsepower car. If it's not
Yes.
making big power and it doesn't need the mega weight transfer.
Yeah. What tire are you running up front? Is he running like say a 26 or 28 up front? Because you can offset some of that rake with a bigger tire in the front.
Let's see. I know it does have some serious rake going on with it. Let's see if it says here.
Because when I went to when I went from the 20 to the 29.5 tire, I actually went up in tire size in the front, and that leveled it out. Made it a little harder to turn, but it definitely leveled it out.
We're so far behind.
We are?
Messages are flying back. But, oh yeah.
Oh man.
Let's see. No, he didn't say anything extra about it, but I'm thinking that, those are some solid tips that Shane gave you. Put a little bit taller tire on the front. It'll take some of that rake out.
Yep. And it's got torsion bar front end too, so
you can always stand it up some.
Yeah, put a couple turns in the torsion bar a little bit, get it up there a little bit, because with the super stock springs, you're not really, like you said, it's probably not a super mega horsepower thing, so you're going to have some weight transfer on it, but it's not going to be crazy.
Jonathan Couchy asked Shane, have you ever been in one of those 81 to 86 Slant 6 vehicles with the lean burn and locking torque converter stock? Really nice. Maybe he saw one once cruising on the highway. I don't know what ice wants.
I don't know.
I see.
But, yes and no. I'm actually building essentially this right now. I do have a locking converter in mind, and it's got, it's a low ratio first and second. And it's definitely not a lean burn, but it's been welded. The actual vacuum advance has been welded, so that way it doesn't have 25 degrees of centripetal type of advance in it. It's only got 15, so it's got a total I think of 28 degrees total, and then 15 in the vacuum, so or 15 or 16 or something like that. I forget what it is, but it's like 45 total degrees when I'm cruising down the road. So it does really good,
So Michael Schmidt's saying it's an old 150 horsepower max flathead 3-speed on the tree with 430 gears.
Oh,
man.
That's going to be an unsynchronized transmission. So anything that he can do to get rid of that would be light years better.
Yeah, and I think you could almost go with any automatic would make an improvement on that.
Absolutely. Anyone,
but
a turbo 350.
I mean, for the sake of the car, let's just say you leave the 3 on the tree in it, and because it's drag racing at the moment, but it's not 20 years down the road. And it's always cool to have a 3 on the tree when somebody has never seen one before. Let's see, man, I would just fine tune that 150 horsepower max flathead as best I can and take all the parasitic weight out of it as I possibly could.
And yes, parasitic, that means spinning and just dead weight.
The other thing I would probably look around at is, depending on what it is, I'll tell you some hints here, some tricks and hints that I've found at the junkyard that nobody else seems to notice. Okay, and Shane may have already seen these too. I don't know, because he's a very observational guy, and you might have seen him some too. But let's say you got a 4 or a 5 on 4.5 bolt pattern like a Mopar. Okay, and you're, oh man, I really need some wheels for drag racing, but I don't have a lot of coin. Okay, the cheapest way to do that, to gain yourself, because losing weight off of a wheel is like a significant value.
That's right.
Okay,
unsprung weight.
Right, exactly. So here's the ticket. Go to the junkyard, find yourself a Lincoln Town car in the trunk, the miniature spare in there. It'll be a 17-inch aluminum wheel. Okay. And it'll be a micro mini spare with a 4 on or 5 on 4.5 bolt pattern that you can literally bolt on. Now, if you spend some time really hunting around, you can find like a 94, 95 Mustang GT. It'll have an aluminum spare wheel that's 15 by 4. So you can actually put a drag race tire on that 15 by 4 wheel. If you really, really, really hunt around, you can find a Lincoln Mark 7 or even an 8. Same thing. They got aluminum spare wheels in them. And those are the things that the little things that you help, right? That help you. Like now you go buy one of those wheels at the junkyard, it's $20 a whack. $20. They don't care if it's steel, aluminum, carbon fiber, whatever. They don't care. They'll say that wheel for $20 a whack. Okay, cool. So you buy 2 of those. Now you're $40 behind. Then you spend the more money that you were going to spend on a set of wheels on a used set of like welds for the rear.
Yep.
Paint them suckers black to match the front. And nobody will ever even pay attention and notice.
That's correct.
Yeah. And it'll knock probably a tenth off even the laziest, slowest car.
Yep. Absolutely.
Let's see.
And pump up the tires in the front. Remember?
Oh, yeah. That's another one. Overinflate. 50 pounds. Yeah. Let's see. Do we get any more? Okay. Aaron Germanson says in the 50s, top end speed was what mattered. What was the top speed? 100 mile an hour and a flathead was a big deal. I think anything flathead, because you're looking at something that's like 50% less efficient than an overhead valve engine, really.
Yes.
Right?
It's a Briggs and Stratton, essentially.
Right. And it's not far from that.
Yeah.
When you had a big accomplishment, like I remember seeing nitro dragsters I did go to I used to do all the same stuff as everybody else before I ran the AHRA. I used to be a normal dude. I went to a hot rod reunion in Bowling Green in 2003 when it was the hot rod reunion. It wasn't the annual. It wasn't the 20th. It was the first one. Mm-hmm. And they had flathead dragsters there running on nitro. And I remember seeing them run. And they were no barn burners. They were not fast. They were not supercharged. They were just an injected flathead running like 60%, 70% nitro. And if you didn't pay attention and you just thought it was a gas-powered dragster, right? Mm-hmm. That's how down on power these things are, because the engine architecture, the engineering hadn't come in. American engineering didn't really come into full effect until like probably 55 to 57.
Yeah,
and we started seeing the after effects in the early 60s when all the great stuff started coming out.
That's right.
The 727 torque flights, the Turbo 400s, the big blocks. That's when the engineering really started making an impact.
Yeah.
And 50 stuff, when you're doing stuff that's interesting with 50 stuff, you're doing something big, right?
Yeah.
Like you take that thing out to the Bonneville Salt Flats and run 120 miles an hour, you got people's attention pretty good.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Let's see.
Doug, go down to 744. Doug's asking a pretty good question here.
All right. Oh, Michael Schmidt here before we get to that. Great ideas, gents. What about higher octane fuel and a low compression, say 8-to-1? Does that improve anything? No.
Nope. It actually hurts.
It's actually less power.
That's right.
Yeah. The fuel burns so slow.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
And so cool,
Yeah. Okay, so 744, you said, huh?
Yeah, it's
Doug Martin here. This one?
Yep.
Thinking long and hard about my trans selection in a D150 727 or a 518. The 727 build will be cheap and good, but no overdrive. The 518 will have overdrive plus locking torque converter, but big money to build.
Actually, there's actually one more that you want to look at. I think it's an RH68. It came in the 2003, 2004, 2005 Dodge Diesels, maybe even the early 2000s Dodge Diesels. And it's got everything that you could imagine in it, and it's still got a cable on it for the line pressure, and it's got the 6 pinion planetaries in it. It's got all the 6 clutches in it. Just go down and find yourself a Dodge Diesel transmission, and it's going to have all the bitchin' stuff in it. Just do a rebuild on that, and that'll handle anything that you that 440 or whatever you're going to do. We'll put to it. It'll be just fine. I've actually built those for a few people, and they work incredibly good.
So Rocky Myers here is saying, I think the hub center is smaller on most of the Ford spares. You can take that to a wheel repair shop. we'll be able to open that up for you to exactly whatever dimension you need. They can actually weld those holes in that spare. I wouldn't even be worried about welding those holes shut, polish the wheel up, re-drill all the holes because they're just made for an acorn lug nut. And so you could re-drill virtually whatever pattern you want into it.
Yeah. And if the hub, like right now on my drag tires, the hub, they don't even really center on the thing.
Oh, yeah, it's bigger for just about fit any application, right?
Yeah, exactly. So basically it's just lining up on the lug nuts anyway. So it doesn't really matter much, on a drag application.
Yeah. And so Michael Schmidt saying spare tire tip, badass. Just want to remain the low ET guy in our Plymouth club. Well, yeah, run those spare tires on the front. And don't worry about it in the back of the car. That unsprung weight is going to really knock some numbers down for you.
Absolutely. Big, huge.
Especially on a very low horsepower car, you'll see a huge improvement. Let's see. One-Eyed Cat saying that live police chase in LA right now. Dude is on his third stolen vehicle. Guy is crazy. Maybe he's trying to turn in his lotto ticket. Right? Didn't somebody out there win? California needs a billionaire right now. That's what they need.
There's always a police chase. When they used to have a police chase channel out there that it would alert you. I think it was on
police chases. Now live on the police chase channel, a police chase.
Right, it would alert you. I think it was on YouTube or something. I can't remember what it was, but I remember I would get these alerts that there's a police chase, and we turned it on the TV, and it was just something you watched. It was just you watched all the time.
Man, Jonathan Couch is coming up with a Wednesday night Tech Talk live drinking game. We should have a drinking game every time Shane says that's right. We take a drink.
That's right. We'll take a drink.
That's right. That's right. Now it's 300, guys. All right. Let's see here. Mopar, Mustang, and minivans. What gear ratio should I use for first, second, and third choice, or third, once I rebuild this 904 torque flight? And what rear ratio should I couple that with? Oh, man.
Well, that's a big question, but I would definitely go with the A99 style ratios, or just the A500, which is the 277 and 154 first and second. And then just obviously third's just the 1-to-1. And then as far as out back, that really comes down to if you want something that you could
wait, the camshaft, weight.
Yeah, I kind of know what he's doing.
Trying to do with the car.
Yeah, and I know what he's got. I know what he's doing. A 355 would be like your best all-around gear. You'll still be able to drive it. You're not going to go 80 miles an hour down the freeway unless you really want to attack the engine. But a 355 is going to be more towards the drag racing. I want to say drag racing, but more of like the racing style. And the 323,
that's like the perfect gear because you could do drag racing with it. You could drive on the street. You could do autocross with it. It's like the ideal gear if you're wanting to do a wide gambit of stuff.
Yep.
It won't be the best at any of them, but it's good all around for all of them.
Yep. Yeah,
That's
exactly.
Right. And that's probably why a lot of the Mopars came with 355 gears.
It's perfect. Yeah, it's a perfect gear. So, Damien, that's what you should put in that thing. That thing would work. That thing would work good.
Jonathan Couchy says the 48 RH is also a good option. Remember, the V10s and diesels have one of the standardized bell housings.
Yeah, it's the only difference is that the planetary. Well, I think these still had the 4 pinion planetaries. Really, anything the 48 RH will be just fine. Also, I mean they're basically 727 with just an overdrive on the back of it. They're basically all the identical. It's just the internal parts. But yeah, 48 RH is good too, and you can get those reasonably cheap.
Danny Boyd said, "Man, I actually bought 2 Powerball tickets yesterday, and I never buy lotto tickets. I'm right there with you. I only buy them when that sucker hits like $1 billion, and it's like, yeah, you know what? You can't win if you don't have a ticket. So I'll just throw my hat in the ring there, and maybe the luck will come my way. But I'm still sitting here poor. So nope."
I wouldn't even know what to do. What was it, 2 billion, or was it 1 point something stupid $billion or something?
That was like 2.5 or something. I think it got up to.
Did someone win it?
Somebody from California won it. Was somebody from LA?
Oh,
it was sold at an Exxon gas station in LA or something like that.
Wow, man, I wouldn't even know what to do. Honestly, I wouldn't have a clue
Well,
what they do.
you know, the last cat that just won that kind of cash was like, I want to say, what, a year ago, like 1.5 million or 1.5 billion.
Yeah.
Well, the government got like a billion of it,
Wow.
right? Or 750 million or some stupid number where it's like over half is tax.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. I'd be like, here's my offshore Cayman account. I need you to deposit that money in immediately. Right?
Yeah, I wouldn't know what to do. I would still probably be my same stupid self, but I don't know, man. I still wouldn't go back to California though.
You know what I would probably do? I'd probably do the same thing I'm doing now, but
Yep.
I wouldn't go to work. I'd probably hire somebody to run the AHRA and then fire them when they do a bad job. Probably the same damn job I do every day. But,
and then hire them again the next day.
Yeah, something like that. And then I don't know what I would do because that would open up a world of. I've never ever in my life had someone build a car for me.
Yeah.
And I never have, and so I don't think I could do that because I'd be like, hey, you're doing it all wrong, or I don't like this, or what a shitty setup you got going on there, right?
Yeah.
And I just don't think I could ever be happy with somebody doing that. So I'd probably still do my stuff, but have a bunch of money in the bank that nobody knew about.
Yeah.
Let's see here. Jonathan Couch is saying the A999 ratios work well with a 323 and a slant.
It does because that low ratio first makes that first gear then now work like a 355. So that's what I was saying is that a 355 gear would work well if you wanted more of a drag racing, and if you're going to more drive it, then run the 323 gear, because then if you're running say a 355, that would act like a 372 or 370 whatever it is gear when you're launching. So it's because that low ratio first gear really makes that much of a difference. It's actually really good.
Yeah, low ratio that's where it's at if the training will hold together.
Yeah.
That's and that 270 kills that 700 R4.
Yeah, but that's a 306, 277.
Right, that's low.
That's low,
Yeah. But the 204R was, in my opinion, the best 80s transmission to come out of the GM.
Yeah.
It is like a 276 first, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't super duper low, but I think the only reason that transmission came out was for the turbo 6-cylinder Buicks, because that's the first thing I ever seen it behind.
Yeah, it basically bolts right into where a turbo 350 was.
Right, and I think it's for those turbo V6 Buicks, so you could load that turbo.
Yep.
Think about it. They had the 700 R4 just sitting there that was heavy duty.
Yeah.
They could easily just put a BOP bell housing on it and done. But they didn't. Why? They needed something. I think that they were looking for something that would load that turbo.
That's right, because turbos want to be loaded. That's right.
Yeah. And that's what makes them run. Let's see. Mopar Man 1978 says, can't you run a certain size tire or rim tires to lower or heighten the gear ratio? Say you're running 15-inch rims on the back and you have 391 gears and want 355.
Yeah.
You can, but here's where they get confused about all this.
Yeah, I do that right now.
15, 16, 17-inch wheel has effect on this. No, it has everything to do with tire diameter.
That's correct. Yes. And that's what I'm doing right now with my car is I have a 26 diameter tire, 26.3 when I'm driving around. That gives me the best, all around efficiency. And then I run a 23 when I drag race it. So yes, and that makes it a full ratio. That's like running instead of a 276, it makes it a 306.
Well, most cars are based around the 26-inch tall tire.
Yep.
Okay. So that's your gear ratio is generally compared to that number. So when you have a 26-inch tall tire and a 355 gear, you literally have 355 gears.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, if you change that tire diameter, like Shane was saying, if you drop it by 2 inches to a 24-inch diameter tire, now you're almost running a 373. You're probably about like 370 or 369 gear, right? But you can actually do the math on this. This is a simple math equation because you just need to know the diameter of the tire, how much area it's going to cover, essentially in 1 mile.
Yeah.
Right. And then you can compare the two, and then you can determine what kind of ratio you're going to have.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see here. Jonathan Couchy says, first gear on my Subaru is like 4-to-1 with 444 gears in the car stock. And that's probably true. Those 4 cylinders aren't known for their mongoloid torque, right? So
They're gonna make it up in RPM.
they just gear them.
Yeah.
That's probably why the Subarus, if you look for a 4-cylinder car, they get horrible gas mileage. They're like 23, 24. And my old man used to live and die by the V6 Buick and the LeSabres. And I know like those cars from like the 90s all the way through like the 2000s were so, if one drove by, you wouldn't even notice it. That's how sad they were. They're such a sad car. But man, they'd kill it on gas mileage with that V6 Buick. They would. They'd get like 30, 32 sometimes. And that's good mileage for a V6. Usually you're looking at 4-cylinders doing that kind of number. All right. So Aaron Germanson saying I have an A518 behind a Magnum 360 in a 92 D150. And I was wondering about optimal all-around rear gears. I
already
picked up
did
a
the
Ford 8.8 with 355s.
This is what I'm actually doing right now. I'm doing an A500 in my Slant 6. The 355 with the 26.3 diameter tire will get you right at 2,350 RPM at 75 miles an hour. So it's like, because of the Overdrive, I believe it is an 069.
That's what I was just going to ask. What is the Overdrive gear ratio on an A518?
069.
Okay, that's actually pretty deep. Overdrive.
Yes, it's deep. It's a deep overdrive, but it's still got a 245 first and a 145 second, because that's basically a 727 style, and they don't have a low ratio first and second. That's the reason why I went with the A500, because it's got the 277. It's for like a lower horsepower or lower torque type of deal. But for that thing right there, I would run the 355 gears with a 26 diameter tire. It's perfect. It would be actually ideal. That's
a Magnum 360. And if you really, depending on what you're trying to do with that combination, you can actually play with tire size, like Shane was saying a few minutes ago. Let's say you went to a 27-inch tall tire, because that 360, you can afford to lug that one a little bit more. It's 360 cubes with that 0.69 overdrive, and that's the same thing that they're using in with a 318. And you would want a 355 gear with that 318 for it to even feel like it had anything.
That's right? Yep.
But that 360, you can afford to put a little bit taller tire on there, and you might see a few more miles per gallon and still retain most of that giddy up. Let's see. My brother's D250 had 456 gears with 31.5-inch tall tires with a 0.75 to 1 overdrive. It's at 2,100 at 55, 2,400 at 65.
That's because of that tall tire.
Yeah. Huh. I know my Ford truck, I have a ZF 5-speed. It's a 393 stroker motor, but it's got a ZF 5-speed behind it. And the overdrive on it's 0.76. And I got 355 rear end gears in that 3/4 ton truck. And if I was to drive, like, say, 70 miles an hour, would be right at 1,900 RPM.
Yeah.
And it's a stick shift. But so it doesn't have anything to do with torque converter locking up or anything like that. It's fully locked all the time. But if it was me, I'd like, well, it is me, actually, we're talking about. I should put a 373 gear in there, and I think it'd be a lot happier, because 1,900 is just right outside the power band. So it's got a lug, right? It's actually happiest around 2,000, 2,100.
Yeah.
And I think a 373 gear would be almost perfect for it. Let's see. All right. Abel D's asking, Dallas, have you ever used a dual plane manifold on a Rover V8? Any added benefits for off-roading and cruising hills to such manifolds? I have never used, I have a 215 and it has a factory dual plane on it. There is a big benefit to those because it's all in plenum volume. Okay. The small, like, one side has a really small plenum volume and one side has a really large plenum volume. And the way that works is generally when you look at a single plane intake manifold, like a racing application only, it just has one big plenum volume where all the runners share the same plenum. When you change that plenum volume and just make it a smaller area surface area, the velocity is so much higher that it creates low end torque. That's what velocity is, what creates low end torque. Velocity mixing in the cylinder. When you're doing it directly below the intake manifold, it does work very well. The benefits of it, it would probably be a lot peppier on the street. It definitely, and I don't know what you have it in. If it has that weird dual path automatic transmission setup like the Skylarks and the Specials and all that stuff, they were a 2-speed, and I don't know what first gear was. We'll just say, 2-to-1, because it's not good, whatever it is. But you'll notice at takeoff, it'll have more grunt. It'll have better fuel economy because it going down the road, people say it only needs 30 to 40 horsepower to go down the road. Okay. Going down the road isn't 30 or 40 horsepower. Going down the road is like 60 foot-pounds of torque. Okay. And that's really what you need. And it's easy to do that when you have a dual plane intake manifold, is make really good usable low end torque at low engine speed. That's where that dual plane shines. The problem with the dual plane is if it ran at 6,500 before, it's probably going to fall on its face at 5,500, right? That's exactly the issue with them, because their plenum volume is so much smaller, right? That's what hurts them. But hopefully, in off-roading and cruising the hills, I would have a dual plane on it for sure. If that's all you're doing. That. Yeah. Let's see. Jonathan Couchy says he'd love to have a ZF 5-speed 306 truck. Well, I was very much considering doing that myself right now, because I got to get fuel economy out of this. I got to get these freaking OPEC out of my wallet.
We kind of skipped over this this week, but I do want to touch on something, and it's actually nice because we're talking about a lot of training and overdrive stuff.
Sure.
It's not really going to be a long talk, but one thing that we need to talk about, if you're going to be running an overdrive type of transmission with a lower ratio gear, obviously you're going to have a drive shaft that's going to be spinning much faster now, because you're going to be able to go 80 miles an hour, and it's going to be overdriven, so it's going to be spinning faster with a deeper gear. So there's one thing that a lot of people don't understand about. There's a term called critical speed. Have you heard about that before, Dallas, at all? Okay, critical speed is on a drive shaft. It takes into account the length of the drive shaft, the diameter, and the type of steel that it's made out of. And then you have another one formula that's called half critical speed. So this was really a problem in a lot of the Buick V6s with the turbo, with the 204R. At 70 miles an hour, a lot of the times they would get like a vibration. And what that is that's the actual half critical speed. It was a very low vibration. So what they would do is they would really set the angle slightly different. They would have, like, say, a 2 degree here and half a degree here. And because they were slightly off at 70 miles an hour, it would offset that critical speed. So if you guys are interested in this, and you really should check into this. And that's the reason why a lot of the manufacturers went to an aluminum drive shaft. But here, for instance,
that up, matter of fact,
yeah. So
Overdrive made those very desirable.
Yes, exactly, and there's a reason for that, because let's just say on my darts, they're right around 48 to 50 inch drive shaft. If you have a 3-inch mild steel, which is 83 wall, your critical speed, which is basically where the thing's going to fly apart, is 6,900 RPM. Well, you think, wow, that's really high. But remember, you're overdriven. So that's going to be right at your 70 to 80 mile an hour mark. Now, that same drive shaft with 3.5 inch with aluminum, and it's going to be a 125 wall for that same length, is going to be now 8,100 RPM. And then if it's a 4-inch 125 wall, it's going to be 9,600. So what I'm getting at is that if you're going to be thinking about doing an overdrive, really look at critical speed. If you guys need help with the math, you can Google it, or you can send it to me, slantdailygarage@yahoo.com.
I've never thought of that. I should have changed to aluminum drive shaft, and almost everything I had that's got an overdrive in it.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, that's the big thing. And that's why you always go to a larger diameter, because that's definitely going to help the critical speed. And also too, the thicker is going to be better. And then they have, mild steel, chromoly, aluminum, and then obviously carbon fiber. Carbon fiber is going to be way off the charts as far as like say a 3 3/4 with a 120 wall carbon fiber is going to be 14,500. But remember, those guys are really spinning those things. So, but yeah, really look into the critical speed, because all of a sudden you're going to get a vibration and you're not going to like know where this is at. And it's just because you're using a drive shaft that is not. In fact, I'm actually having that issue right now, and that's the reason why I really can't go past 80 miles an hour in my Slant 6. The way it sets right now is because it's got only a 3-inch diameter drive shaft that necks down to 2-inch in some areas, and with I'm spinning that thing, at 2,500 RPM, going through that drive shaft, it's at a half critical speed. So it starts to get this little vibration at about 80 miles an hour, 81 miles an hour. So I try to either go over it or under it. So it's either 85 or 75. So you want to stay away from that half critical speed.
Well, so it's funny that, okay, we're talking about this right now. I'm going to have to come back to Aaron Germanson's question, because he has a good question here too. But Doug Narden says, will the aluminum drive shaft handle the horsepower from a big block?
Yes.
Because it's thicker wall tubing, right? What he's saying is it's 83 thousandths thick on a steel one, and then it's 125 thousandths thick on the aluminum drive shaft.
And remember, torque goes on the outside of something. That's
that's what I was just going to bring up, on the shaft. That's why if you ever look at a drive shaft, it's completely hollow, right? Because the only place that torque resides on it is the exterior of it, right?
Exactly.
And the larger that it is, the more torque it can handle. The larger the diameter, the more torque it can handle.
That's correct.
All right. So Aaron Germanson is saying, question, okay, with a future project, I have a 53 Chrysler hardtop. It has a bad flathead right now. I'm thinking about putting an early Gen 3 Hemi with a 727. I then find a decent rear end. He says, I want drivability.
Okay. Well, if he's going to do that, I would just go with a really early 5.7, and instead of a 727, just run a 904, because that's not going to make a ton of power. The early Hemis, I think
Actually, they're like 340 horse.
Yeah, it's a 350 horse, and then you'll have that lower ratio first gear, which you can get, and that'll get that thing out of its own way, and that way you can actually drive that thing around. And Look, I love 727s, but if you're going to be dealing with low horsepower or lower horsepower and something that's a driver, the 904 is the way to go.
Right. And here's something that people don't really consider when they look at transmissions and stuff like that. All right. So I'm a big fan Turbo 400, right? Turbo 400 is brutally strong. There's a reason why they run it in just about every racing application that there is. It is a freaking power hog. And it's because of all the mass that it has to turn. Okay. When they made it into a 4L80E, and every LS guy couldn't wait to put a 4L80E in their LS junk. And it's like, holy cow, do you realize how much mass it's even turning, how much more mass it's turning with that 4L80E? First off, they took the 4L or the Turbo 400, and they had all that mass in there, plus the pump and all this stuff with the shaft. And then you change it to a straight cut gear assembly and put 5 planetaries in it. So now it's got more parasitic loss. It's got your energy, which is your circular motion of your rotating mass, turning into noise because it's straight cut gears, right? So you're turning it into noise. And then you threw an addition of an overdrive pack on there that probably weighs another 20 something pounds. I bet it's probably 65 pounds of rotating mass for a 4L80E. I'd almost bet bottom dollar on it that it's some ridiculous, stupid number like that.
You know what? I can try. We can test that. TCI has got an amazing new transmission dyno that we just got. It's state of the art Mustang type. We can do trans brakes on it. We can do. It's just amazing. It can do 800 foot-pounds of torque capable. Well, so I could test that. We could put a 4L80 on it and test how much torque does it take to turn that thing and make one torque at the back. I
Well,
can test that.
that'd be a good test, because I tell you what, there's a lot of things that people miss when they start looking at, I'm just going to throw a 4L80 in it. Okay, well, hold on a minute. You're also looking at when you take all that mass and you have to keep spinning it, right?
Yeah.
You're killing fuel economy. You're killing performance. The numbers that you had before might not be the numbers that you have now.
No.
Because
all absorbed.
That weight, right?
Yeah.
And so that's where transmissions that came into play, like, I know everyone laughs, like the T5, the world-class T5, when it came out, and they were being abused specifically in the 5-liter Mustangs, but they came out in the S10 pickups with a 2.5-liter Iron Duke. And those were transmissions that were made specifically for low horsepower, low torque applications to push a 3,100-pound car down the road and only have 140 horsepower or 96 horsepower, right? And people laughed at them in the 302, like, oh man, they blow up every week. Well, of course they do. They were meant for something with really low torque numbers and really low horsepower numbers.
Yeah.
But they take, I saw a fly land on the input shaft and it turned 4 times on the output shaft as the fly was landing, right? And there's literally no drag in that transmission.
As the wings were coming down, right? It was turning.
Right. And that's the thing. It's like, there is some give and play in those transmissions. The 904, but we talked about this before, is like the least power hungry transmission that there is.
Second.
Okay, so you get the Power Glide is the first least.
That's right.
Right? But it's literally 2 gears. You got to multiply your torque all the time just for it to make any, and it really works in a light car, big horsepower application really well. Okay. Then you get your 904. Then it comes turbo 350 and then C4 forward.
Yeah, C4 and turbo 350 are really close. I mean, they're within a horsepower, so it's hard to tell which ones, but they're really close right there.
Yeah, and then you would have to probably throw in there right after those would be like your AODs. Let's see, 204R. What was the first generation Chrysler Overdrive? The A518.
Yeah, the A518 and the A500, which is A500 is basically a 904. And then with
an overdrive pack on it.
Yeah, right? With an overdrive pack on it. Yeah, exactly. That's actually what I'm putting on my Slant.
Okay, and then starts coming your 60s model heavy duty stuff, C6s and 727s and turbo 400s, and now you get to the heavy duty application overdrives, and then
50 horsepower.
It's probably like your Allison 1000, right?
Yeah, right.
95 horsepower to put it in first gear. Those are the things that it's like no one really looks at those numbers. They look at the brute strength of them. But if you want something to be quick and fast and sprightly, you really got to start looking at the middle range there and find a good transmission person that can make those work. Right. Yeah. That's what I think. But I think that would be kind of cool to figure out. But, well, you and I talked about, so my Suburban has a turbo 400 in it. Power hungry hog, right? So 40, I think it's 44 horsepower to turn a turbo 400.
Yeah. 50 for a Chrysler 727, but I think it's 40 something for a 400.
We were looking at I was considering a 4L80E, right? And I look at how much was the power input of it and how much is it used and this and that. And I realized something. You're getting a 0.76 to 1 overdrive with a 4L80E. And I'm like, well, that's the same number as a gear vendor, right? So then what does a gear vendor take? Well, it doesn't take anything actually because it's on the output shaft of the transmission, right? So it's still 44 horsepower. And then you bolt on your $3,000 gear vendor or whatever, and you get about the same amount of work out. So it isn't really robbing anything.
Yeah, the gear vendor takes 1 horsepower to run the pump. That's all it takes.
Is that what it is?
Yeah, it's 1 horsepower.
Well, that's amazing. So I think, those are some things that really need some looking at, because instead of gaining horsepower in the engine, it might be easier to just cut your project down.
Yeah, parasitic loss.
30 horsepower or 50 horsepower.
Yeah, my car, my Blue Dart, when I was racing in California, I had a 727 in it. And the second I went to a 904, I picked up 3/10.
Well, see, and you and I were running the same kind of deal. Shane and I were like, we're running, it was 10.5-inch 10.5 NA, right?
Yep.
And we were like the bottom rung cars. Like when you started, oh man, these guys are running 10.5 NA. Yeah. And it was like, the Pro Mod guys that nobody ever talked about that were running Pro Mod that just had nitrous on a 302 Ford and stuffed in a Fairmont, right? That had literally nothing on it. That was me and Shane. We were like the low end tier guys at the back of the pack. I mean, could we run with everybody? Yeah, but we'd have to whack them on the tree, and you'd have to hope that they screwed up or get in their head, and you'd have to play the games because you got to make up like 2.5 tenths, right?
Yeah.
That's what separates the field.
Yeah, they were like literally 590, and I just couldn't. I just was like a 610, 620 car. You know what I mean?
That's exactly how I was too.
Yeah, right in that range. So I would play with them on the tree. I would roll in. I would either double bowl them or make them sit there and wait. And I would pack my gloves, and just make them kind of am I rolling in too fast? You got to play with them, and then that's when I started chopping down the tree. I was like, man, I got a nice dead and bare button, and it was just, man, that that's how you got to play the game.
But Shane and I both. And there was a couple other guys. Mike Torbett was running a big cubic inch Windsor Ford small block.
Yep.
But we were all doing the same kind of thing. I was running a C4. Shane was running his 904. A lot of guys were running small block transmissions because we didn't have the money to make the big power on the motor. So you made it up on the transmission.
That's right.
Or you used the rear end that didn't hog up a bunch of power. You could throw a 9-inch Ford at it, and yeah, it's never going to break. But man, you run an 8.8 Ford and it takes 15 less horsepower to turn it. You might be replacing housings every season, but that's about it,
Yeah, I was running an 8 3/4. I still am, in that car, and it's just because it didn't take as much power to turn, and that's just what I had. So it just is what it is.
And a lot of it comes down to that cost effectiveness and. I got lucky. My C4, I tore it up, I think the third weekend out there. And luckily you and Steve Sherman turned me on to this guy, Dana Sniff.
Mm-hmm.
He was like Mr. Ford transmission guy.
Yeah.
And they had a small block car that was, what were they running in? Before that, they were running the Outlaw Street Car Association before it went away. Right?
Yeah.
And I can't remember what class they were running, like modified hot rod or something like that. I don't remember what the class was. They had the damn quickest car out there, and it was a Nutsola combination. It was like what you would have seen in pro stock in like the early 80s. Yes. It was like a 9.2 deck Windsor block with like A350 Boss heads on it that were used in NASCAR or C3 Yates pieces or something.
Yeah.
Just really neat stuff, but C4 Ford running 920s, and you're like, how are you guys doing that? I need to take my junk up there. And they were good. So I guess lesson from this one is don't overbuild it if you don't have to. And if you do overbuild it, know what your options are. If you're thinking about overbuilding it, know what your options are. And
53 Chrysler.
What's that?
That Chrysler hardtop can't be more than what, 3,300 pounds, 3,300, 3,400 pounds, Yeah. And so you figure that, most darts with a 350 horse had 904s in them. So, yeah.
Well, so Andy says you can split gears with the gear vendors, which is cool. I agree. I think that's where this Suburban, when I finally get to the point, I just drove out to Northeast and back this weekend. And, this past weekend. I tell you what, it's so cool. That freaking switch pitch is so badass, dude, because you'll be going up an on-ramp, and here I got 6,500 pounds worth of Suburban going up this on-ramp, and I can lay waste to almost anybody on an on-ramp because that thing, it'll get to like 2,600 RPM and just hang there, go through all the gears, and then the converter will slip in high gear until you get on the on-ramp, and it detects that you have 4 inches of vacuum or more. And then the converter will go into low stall. And then you want to get around somebody, all you do is you press the gas down, the converter will drop down within once it goes below 4 inches of vacuum, it'll go to high stall. I don't even drop down a gear, and the thing takes off like a rocket. I love it. I just need to stop leaking everywhere. But I think it's the seal on the speedometer. It's got
speedo seal,
the housing. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's leaking like mad, and that's what I'm chasing.
Oh,
But Clint from Clint Street Machine says, Shane, I'll loan you my 700 if you want to add that to the Dyno Day.
I've got plenty of them there at TCI.
It would be cool to get like a definite number on all of them, though, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, that's something I can just do in my off time. Yeah, because we're.
I tell you what, you need to get the folks from TCI on that, and then you can put a list on the website. This is the horsepower it takes to turn each one of these, right? And then, like, what you're losing.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Someone did this on the 904s and 727s and all that other stuff before. But this would be kind of cool to get something on the overdrive ones, because I'd be really curious on those.
Huh. Me too, because I don't think anybody's ever done any numbers on them. And see, when they have the overdrive, they don't put the overdrive on the output shaft like a gear vendor's is. They always put the overdrive in the middle of the transmission, so you got to turn that entire assembly all the time.
Yeah, and that makes a big difference too. And we should actually call it torque, as how much it takes torque to turn these. I know we say horsepower, but everyone understands horsepower. But on an overdrive, especially when you have a percentage of overdriven, it's going to take more torque to turn that, because it's overdriven. It's not a 1-to-1.
Huh. Michael Schmidt's here saying, Aaron, there was an overdrive from Borg Warner that came available on 52 for the 3 on the tree Mopars. Cool trans, helps drivability, 30% overdrive. You can split gears with it too. That's what's cool about the external overdrive packs that you just load up on there and on the output shaft, and you can split the gears. They're not power hungry, but they are expensive.
Yeah.
There is some options, and I know that. So Doug Narn, says gear vendors are crazy expensive, though. They are, and no doubt about it. But if you sit down and you do the math, if that thing gives you, let's say, 10%, okay, 10% better fuel economy. Let's say you had a big block truck and it was getting 12 miles a gallon, so you get 1.2 miles to the gallon better. How long would it take you to make up that $3,000? Okay. So if you sit down and you do the math, it might be 5 years. So at that point, it might not be worth the money if you look at it like that. If you had something that, like my Suburban, when they came with a 350 Chevy, they would get like 8 miles to the gallon.
It's crazy.
If you got 10% better fuel economy, 0.8 miles to the gallon, right? You'd be getting 9 miles to the gallon. Would that pay for itself? That probably would pretty quick.
Well, you've doubled your mileage.
I have, yeah. It gets almost 16 now. Well, it got 16.4 on the way there.
So could you imagine if you did an overdrive and got close to 20?
Yeah, that'd be amazing. For that thing is a freaking brick.
Yeah.
It literally is this. There's a reason why they call it square body.
Yeah.
Not because it's round. So Mohawk 62 saying, another great tech night. Thanks, guys, but I have to go. Have a great day. All right, see you later, Mohawk.
Take it easy, man. Have a good week.
Travis from Mopar Garage says, it's a Chevy. It will die if it stops leaking, Dallas. You know what? They always used to tell me that a small block Chevy didn't run good unless it leaked.
That's how you know oil's in it.
Let's see. Doug Narden saying that, here we go. Cope Racing Trans did a side-by-side comparison of 727 with gear vendors and a 518, and the 518 was under 1K more, plus you got a locking converter. Both are Cope Performance built also. Okay, so it costs just under $1,000 more for the 518, right?
Yeah, I believe that's putting all the really good stuff in it too, because 727 you can put all the good stuff into it, and that's if you already got a good 727. I saw that video a long time ago, or him talk about that, and I've known John Cope for a long time. He's a good guy. The only thing I have a problem with the gear vendor, and this is it. This is the only problem I have, is that with the 727 you have the transmission, then you have this big long tail housing, and then you have another heavy object sticking on the back of it. So it's kind of, it's got a lot of reinforcement on it, but you have two heavy objects on either end that only has one support. sometimes where, you know, when you're dealing with that, you're going to have a lot of times with flex. So the 518 is a much more compact type of deal. It would, I don't know, man. It's a hard pull. It's a hard sell for me. If I did the 727, I would probably run like a 4-wheel drive one that has a shorter tail shaft, so that way I could bolt that gear vendor much closer to the actual transmission.
Oh, instead of having that really long tail shaft.
Yeah, exactly. Because that thing's 18 inches long.
Well, Aaron Hinkler says he wants to see the 204R on that dyno test.
You know what? I'll actually see if I can get that set up. I'll see if I can get some things, and I'll just start posting them.
Nicholas R says, I'm about to rebuild a Dodge 4.7, but the ridiculous specs in the manual have me worried. Any bore taper or out of round, replace the block. Any scoring or bluing on main bearings, replace the engine. Here's what I know about the 4.7. They were a short-lived motor at Chrysler, and they had all kinds of epic failures with them. I mean, like I remember seeing them burnt valves in like the early 2000s. Those things burnt valves like they were made out of candy.
That's right.
I don't know much more than that about them, but I know that they weren't around long, and there's probably a reason for it. And they didn't even continue with the architecture of the engine.
No.
So
it was a Mercedes-Benz. They stole a lot of that from the Mercedes-Benz.
Did they?
Yes, that's what it's from. And you know, I
would probably explain those crazy, ridiculous specs too.
Yeah, exactly. I did a few camshafts for these. They're basically just regrinds. I was able to put 10 degrees into them, but man, was it a pain in the butt to get that thing to actually tune at that point, because, you know, the heads are just the way the whole engine is just set up. You get any type of gallop in that thing, and it was just impossible to tune. The guy ended up pulling that out and putting a Hemi in it, and it actually went light years faster with the stock engine. So
yeah, it would almost be beneficial just to look and see what your swap options are.
Yep, that's why I mentioned that.
They're tough to work on, and I've heard nothing but horror stories about them.
Yeah, there's such a, you're going to sink so much money into it, and you're going to get, you know, subpar performance out of it. If you could just get it, somehow sneak a Hemi in there, if it's going to be in a truck, it's going to bolt right in, and it would be light years ahead of where you're at.
Oh, let's see here. Oh, John Murphy's asking, what trans is in my Suburban? I have technically it'd be a Turbo 400, but it was available only from 64 to 67. It's actually called a Super Turbine 400. It's a switch pitch torque converter. It has 2 speeds built into the torque converter. So
2 stalls.
Two stall speeds. So it has a low stall and a high stall. And then essentially the transmission itself is a Turbo 400, but it was meant to work with big Buicks and Cadillacs to allow them to tow well as drive well. And it works fantastically. I absolutely love it. It's the neatest thing I ever owned, I think.
Yeah. I did a lot of research on that thing too, as far as how the stator works, because that's where it's all done, is in the stator.
Right.
And that was the very first type of, I don't want to use fluid into the converter to change something. That's how they use that technology to make the locking converter. But it would use basically a fluid channel down the input, and then it would just basically use that, and it would turn the fins, and that's how it changes the stall, just by turning the fins on the stator.
Yeah, well, it works fantastically. The one thing that you need to make sure that you have is a transmission cooler the size of a school bus behind you, because that thing builds heat fast, because it's like having a stall converter in a 6,500-pound car, right? So it creates a lot of heat, but it does, man, does it have some freaking giddy up. And then that's why I want to put a gear vendors behind it, because now technically it would become like a 12-speed Turbo 400 is what it would be. But so Danny Boyd's saying some external overdrive units bolt in place of the tail housing. I think so. That's exactly how the gear vendors is. And I know that there was a couple more made. Like I think Nash made one. Doug Nash made one.
Yeah, there was another company too that made one that kind of bolted on.
They're similar to gear vendors.
It was 1990s or something like that.
I tell you what, you can search them on Marketplace, And every time if you just put in gear vendors, sometimes these other ones come up because people don't know how to classify them. But to tell you the truth, a lot of them came on motorhomes. That's where they started their life at, was because of your motorhome. I mean, God, think about it. You go from 6 to 7 miles a gallon. That's a big freaking deal on a motorhome. All right. So
I'm doing a quick search for them right now. See what I find.
Okay. The scale modeling on the cheap says with an overdrive, not only do you get better mileage, you also get reduced engine accessory wear. That's 100% true. That's how those cars from the 70s, remember I told you in other ones, my old man used to say, don't touch a car with 60,000 miles or greater on it. It's a piece of junk. That changed drastically when you went to the overdrive transmissions. Cars were going over 200,000.
Mm-hmm.
And now people don't even bat an eye when it's got over 100,000 on it.
Yeah, my diesel truck, I just went 167 in that thing. I'm not even batting an eye in that thing.
Well, my friend Jeremy that lives over there by you, his brother has a 7.3 Power Stroke truck that he bought new, right? Like in 96 or something.
Mm-hmm.
It just turned over 400,000. And it's the original engine, original transmission. I don't know how you get so damn lucky, but I mean, it is a stick shift. Thank God, because if it was an E4OD, it would have had like 92 of them in there by now.
Right.
But, yeah. Let's see. One-Eyed Cat saying, which is Don English. You met him probably at the No Name Nationals.
Oh, okay.
This winter weather coming is giving me the blues already. I'll work on my hot rod outside. Yeah, it's rough.
Yeah, that sucks. Even in San Diego, when winter was there, it just didn't make me work on my cars much because I worked on my stuff outside, and I was just like, man, this sucks. And then I moved here, and I'm like, nah, this really sucks to be outside working on your car. I had no idea what it was.
So Kyle Erickson here says, I have a BOP 2-speed. Guy thought it was a Power Glide. Apparently it has a switch pitch converter. Okay. Kyle, that's actually called a Super Turbine 300. And it is a switch pitch torque converter. Some of them have it, some of them don't. So it depends what it's in. If it's a Buick, it probably does have it. Oldsmobile, it was optional, and Pontiac didn't have them at all. But if it does have that switch pitch, let's see here. I had a receipt for that guy. All right, get online, look up this guy, Bruce Rowe. He has a controller for a switch pitch because they were originally operated by 2 solenoid switches that were up on the throttle linkage. And those switches, they'd fail after 5-6 years. The heat would just get to them and they'd fall apart.
Mm-hmm.
The replacements of those don't exist. So you're kind of on your own. This guy, Bruce Rowe, made a controller for it. It's like $150 and it's all electronically controlled. And it's not switches. It runs off of vacuum and timing. And that's all you got to do. I mean, you literally hook up like 3-4 wires on the thing, I think. One of them is power, one of them is ground. So, I mean, it can't be too damn hard. And then I think the other one's kick down. It is a kick down goes through there. Because when you mat the thing, that's when your kick down sends the signal to that deal. But that controller has made this switch pitch so freaking enjoyable. You'll absolutely love that thing. I'm telling you, it is about the neatest thing. And I still have yet to get my trans cooler. And when I do, it's going to be the biggest damn one they make with a fan on it and the whole nine. But I want to tow with it to see how well it does, because I've dropped the engine 55 cubic inches, and I bet you right now, the way I got it tuned and dialed in, this Suburban with a 400 Buick would probably give that 455 a run for its money with that extra switch pitchediness. I don't know what you would call it. Let's see. So an electric 225 would have one. Okay, so if you're wanting to know about the switch pitch, I have a video up on Mr. Rodder's Neighborhood that gives you the rundown on the whole thing. But it was only 64 to 67. And the problem is, if you're looking for the Turbo 400 one, 64, 5, and 6 were all nail head. So they have a nail head bell housing bolt pattern. 67 is the only one you can get for a big block Buick that was a BOP pattern. If you want something other than a Buick, though, you can get one out of that same era Cadillac, and it has a BOP pattern on it. So good luck on your hunt. It took me almost 2 years to find one. Let's see. Travis Mopar Garage is saying, question, is a trans temp gauge really worth it with a trans brake?
Yes.
Yes.
100%. And the reason being is every second is 10 degrees. Every second you're on the trans brake is 10 degrees.
Yeah, and I remember seeing the poor Nivlac Nelson guys at the No Name Nationals that something happened with the staging where they rolled the car into the beams and they were up on the converter and the lights just didn't come down. Yeah. Right? Do you remember that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And it happened, I think, like 2, maybe 3 times. It had something to do with the way that thing was staging, and it was just either screwing the tree up or they didn't have the right setting, or I don't have no idea.
Oh, before I forget, there is we were talking about critical speed. Spicer. If you hit critical speed in Spicer, they have a really nice calculator for your operating RPM of your drive shaft. It gives you critical speed and half critical speed, and the half critical speed is what you really need to look at because that's going to make your vibration. So I just want to throw that out there.
Well, Broken Soldier Speaks says gear vendors are great with a 410 or up for a 71 Silverado with a 4060E. So I imagine that he probably has one.
Yeah.
That's very specific. But I wouldn't go out on a limb. I would actually say they would work pretty good with something that's like makes good low end torque down to probably like a 342 gear. Let's see. Mayhem Motorsports is asking, how much can a guy safely deck a slant?
100,000, with no questions asked. I've done 150 thousandths, and I've done 100 off the deck and 100 off the head without even thinking about it. And that really comes down to the block. There was early versions and later versions of them, but I can tell you right now, 100 thousandths easily. Whenever I just have the block done, I just whack 100 thousandths right off of it because those things are 180 thousandths into the hole the pistons are right off the bat. So that actually gets you some sort of squinch, something closer to the deck, be a little less prone to detonation.
Kyle Erickson says, any way to tell from converter or case? I'm sure he's talking about switch pitch. Again, go back and look at that video I did. I want to say it was called like this. Is this real or not? The 6-speed turbo 400. And I give you there is a way to identify the converter because it has some extra weld marks on the outside of the converter. I can think to hold the pistons for the stator in place.
Yep.
But the only way to truly tell on a turbo 400, normally on the driver's side, there's an electrical prong that hangs off the side on every turbo 400. That's its kickdown. Okay, that goes to a solenoid inside that operates the kickdown. On a switch pitch, there's 2 prongs on that thing. One is your normal turbo 400 style kickdown. The other one is mounted vertically underneath of it. It's almost shaped like a T. They're almost shaped like a T, the way they come together. But that's the only way to tell that it's actually a switch pitch. That second prong is to run the solenoid inside the pump that directs fluid to change the switch or the pitch in the converter. All right. Doug Narden says, good night. Time for bed. All have a good week. See you Wednesday night. Dougster is out. P.S. Big thanks to Professor P in Dallas.
Oh, thanks, man.
Yeah,
have a good night,
Mr. Narden. All right. 2 Hacks is asking, Shane, what are your thoughts on a clutch flight?
Ooh, I actually have all the parts for a clutch flight. I was going to build one and put it in something. My biggest problem with the clutch flight is it's like taking, and we all know exactly what happens when you do this with a 727, is that it's a neutral drop. Essentially, with a clutch, you're basically just dumping it, and torque flights don't like that. they basically just blow out the rear sprag and things go bad fast. That's what you're doing with the clutch flight. You're basically dumping the clutch and letting it ride. Like I said, I have all the parts to make one of these. Really, it's only just the special gearing that keeps the pump turning when it's idling. And then you're basically, it's just a clutch with a flex plate and and a flywheel and so on and so forth. I like them. They're very nostalgic. They're cool, but you're going to blow out. You're going to break transmissions with them, and that's the reason why they didn't last very long. And with the converters the way they are nowadays, there's really no point in them. That's just, it's more of a nostalgia thing. I was going to build a 65, straight axle with one just to have like a nostalgic clutch flight, and put it on the side, clutch flight. You know what I mean? Because that was right around the big time. But yeah, the tech is so much better nowadays that you just don't need that anymore.
That's because back then no one made converters.
That's correct. It was a stock converter. Exactly.
Right. Let's see. Broken Soldier speaks. I'm Simi 172. We talked over the summer. Oh yeah, that's right. I did talk to you this summer. I'm sorry. I've been kind of freaking going 2,000 miles an hour in every different direction since like, I don't know, March. I was 2 months behind the racing season to start because I was sick. I had the vid for like a long time. Okay, Michael Schmidt asks, Shane, why do you run the slant pistons in the hole? Are there no pistons available to reach the deck, or is the valve clearance issue?
No, there's really no pistons available. And Wiseco sells one for like a Chevy or sort of a 2.2 or something like that. But you got to change rod and you got to change all this. Really, what I was trying to do with all my slant stuff is I was trying to do exactly what a lot of people do. Let's take all the factory stuff and just, what can I do with it? But there's really no pistons available. In fact, they're actually getting harder and harder just to find even just 30 over or 40 over
stuff.
Yeah, just to find stock piston stuff. But there's really nothing available. And believe it or not, the factory shim was a 20,000 shim. So when they made aftermarket pistons, the pistons were actually farther in the hole than they were before. And then you're putting a 40,000 gasket on. So before, if you had 8.5 to 1 compression, then you rebuild it with the pistons now available, and then put an actual gasket on it. You're sometimes down to like 7.9. So a lot of people, that's why a lot of people just whack 100,000s right off the bat. Is for that exact reason. They just don't make stuff for me anymore.
Well, and the good thing about a slant is if you just take 100,000s off the piston or off the deck of the block, and then let's say another 60,000s off the head, the only thing you could have to change on that whole thing would just be the push rods, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that would be freaking. That's an easy way to do it right there.
Yeah,
you probably get some good compression out of those things. I don't know where do they start getting detonation prone if you start getting too high?
I have 9.3 on mine, and it's basically you have to keep it tuned, and I got to run 93 in it. With the timing, I have 11 degrees or 12 degrees of initial. Total is about 28 degrees. Anything beyond that, and also too with my cam package that I have, I'm really trying to build as much as I can out of it. But 9 to 1 and 9.5 to 1, depending on your cam package and your exhaust. But that's really where you're going to start seeing issues after that. 9.5 for the street racing. Some people are running those things with
13, 14, 1. You could probably get them up there pretty high.
Yeah, because you can whack them down really good.
Yeah. Destroyer 1320 Eric is in the house.
Hey, what's going on?
Oh man. Okay, so Travis Mopar Garage saying what temp range trans temp gauge should I get?
Well, I wouldn't get anything over 220 personally, because
when you start getting like 200, isn't that where you start sweating bullets?
Yeah, you start to things start to go bad. So 220 would be the max. Usually a transmission likes to be right around 180. The closer you stay to right around 180, the longer it's going to last. But yeah, that would be my middle ground. If you can stay right around 180, middle ground.
All right. So Michael Schmidt saying, is there any reason not to turn a flywheel with a brake lead?
I don't see why not. It's going to vibrate.
As long as you have a smooth surface, I don't think it would matter.
Yeah, I mean, you could probably put even that ring, you put on the rotors to keep it from that rubber with the lead weights on them, because of how big they are. It's going to probably ring a little bit, but Honestly, why not? You can just try to do that. It'd be really hard to get it square and flat, though.
Well, that's what I was thinking. Is I don't think it would be very true. You're going to take some off, but I don't see why you couldn't do that.
You probably use a dial indicator and get it square. That would be hard to get square because you're turning it because it's got hot spots in it. So you'd have to use a dial indicator near the inside of it by where the bolts to. I don't know. I mean, you could probably try it.
Normally, when they true them on essentially a table with a stone on it. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Crashed the internet. The table with a stone on it to true it smooth and flat all the way around at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
I think I bet you that has something to do with it, because when you take that thing like on your brake lathe, the run out on those things can be pretty horrendous after they've been heated and cycled like a bunch of times, right?
Yeah, 15,000s.
Yeah, and I'm kind of wondering if it would not cut true and even. I don't know. You do it on the brakes, but the brakes are much smaller surface that you're trying to true. I don't know. That's a good question. That might be worth trying it out.
Yeah,
I know it doesn't use a stone. It uses the like a
carbide insert.
Yeah. I don't know. I wonder how they're originally done. Are they done on a stone? I think they actually are done on a stone.
Yeah, originally. We actually have them at TCI. We use them for pump grinding, but essentially it locks it down from 3 different areas, and then it's spinning and the stone is spinning, and you're cutting, this part of the as it's spinning, you're cutting the end of it, and so you're cutting in and away from it, and you're taking off, a couple thou at a time. That's it. So it's a really slow process. And then on the final pass, you true the stone and then give it, half a thou cut to clean it up.
Well, Jason's Garage is saying, looking for recommendations for a stall speed for stock 5.3 with a power glide. Man, if it's stock 5.3, I wouldn't go over 2,500 stall.
Yeah, there's no point, because that's going to be building peak torque right at that point,
Yeah.
But you're going to probably want something to get into. And if it's a stock 5.3, I mean, no offense, why are you running a glide? I mean, is it a really light vehicle? You'd be much better off with some speeds. Usually a glide is good for a higher horsepower, lighter type of vehicle.
Or turbo application.
Yeah, or a turbo application, exactly.
Maybe that's what he's doing. Maybe he has a turbo setup.
Jason, if you want to send that question to slantdailygarage@yahoo.com, once again, that's slantdailygarage@yahoo.com. Just include all your information, as far as the car, weight, that way you don't have to put it in an open form, and I don't tell anyone this stuff. Throw it in there, and then I can tell you exactly what you need for stall speed. And as far as what you're running for a power adder, because I'm assuming it's going to be a power adder of some sort. So
Aaron Hinckley saying, is the 170 and 190 slants that far in the hole?
They all were pretty far in the hole. The 170, I've only taken apart one 170 and I didn't measure it, so I'm sorry. The 198, I can tell you, yeah, they're pretty far in the hole. The only really difference between any of them is the 170, it doesn't have as tall of a deck. The 198s and the 225s are the same deck height. They just all have the same bore. It's just strokes. I think it's 3.125, I think, for the 170, and the 225 is 4.125 for the stroke, and the 198, someone's going to correct me on this, but I think it's 375, I believe. But that's why the 170 is really the ideal slant, is because the head was designed for the 170. Really, it is. So when you start making these things under square with that big stroke and small bore, the 225 is at a huge disadvantage right off the bat. It's going to make a lot of torque. There's really not going to be much horsepower with that. So the 170 is the way to go. But as far as that, to answer your question, I know the 198s are. The 170, I've only taken apart one.
So Jason's Garage says he's machined a few, I'm assuming the flywheels, on Amco lathe, and they were noisy for a while.
Yeah. That's what I was thinking, because it's so far away from center line. It's going to be making tons of noise, because that thing's going to be getting faster and faster and faster as it gets out there.
Be chattering too as it's cutting, right?
Exactly. Yes, it's going to be making a ton of noise. So you're going to have something that's some sort of ring, even a 2x4, just to hold on to it while it's cutting. So that way it keeps some of the vibration down, the noise, the harmonics.
Well, Clint Street Machine says, would a power glide be better for 8th mile by virtue of one less gear shift? If you're bracket racing, the power glide is the ideal transmission because it's only one gear shift.
And you're on the converter, so you're getting the mechanical advantage of a converter for longer. But it only really works if you have something that's 3,000 and under power car. And as far as your horsepower, somewhere above 600 horse, then you're really going to get the advantage of a power glide.
But in any other application, all right, the power glide was never the transmission of choice until about late 1990s. Okay, that's when bracket racing really started taking over with the power glide, right? Because of it lugged so hard all the time, right? But someone figured out if you use a lightweight combination with big cubic inch, that it actually makes the car super duper consistent. And it does. You only got one gear shift, right? So I mean, it makes all the sense in the world. It just is not a good. If you want to do daily driving, it's probably fine for like 283 cubic inch, even probably up to 350 or 400 small block. But the power glide does have its limitations on the street, and that's why everybody stopped using them. They're not good out of the hole for daily driving. It is not a rocket ship by any means.
No. You're going to be on the converter. It's going to build a lot of heat. Because
that power glide is almost the exact same dimensions as like a Turbo 350, there was so many power glides removed to be replaced by a Turbo 350. It's probably ridiculous for regular street driving, right?
Yeah.
But I would have to say if it's a bracket race only car, then yes, power glide is probably the way to go. If you're going for super duper high horsepower turbocharged application stuff, you're probably better off with like a 2-speed Turbo 400. Because generally when you're talking like turbocharged application stuff, you're talking a pretty heavy door car most of the time. And those power glides, they start meeting their limitations. Let's see. Clayton's Toolbox says, I just had an engine balanced. Is there any horsepower gains to balancing, or is it just going to help keep it alive?
Well, that depends on if the engine is. It's always going to help with harmonics. So I'm going to say yes, because I can tell you right now that it's going to make horsepower longer. How about that? That's a better answer. It's going to make horsepower for a much longer time, and the bearings are going to be much happier. And that really depends on if it's internally or externally balanced from the factory, and if you're changing from externally to internally balanced. But I always balance everything. I balance it within, a lot of places go within half a gram. I get it down to the 1/10 of a gram.
Here's what I do know, because I've only had a few engines balanced in my life. And that's because most of the time I just ran with stock stuff. And stock is they're all kind of within the same number.
Ish.
Yeah, they're all fairly close. So what they do that on purpose so they don't have to balance each individual engine, right? Because it would cost them an arm and a leg to try to balance every engine that came out of the plant. And then you would pay so much more for a car, right? And you would probably never notice anything different. But when you balance an engine, generally your bearings last longer. When your bearings last longer, there is a gain that's to be had there because it's a lot less friction.
Harmonics, yeah.
Right. And it may not translate into numbers that you see, but when you got to change the bearings every 2 to 5 seasons instead of 1 to 2 seasons, that makes a huge difference on a racing application.
Yeah.
When you don't have to take it out and rebuild it every couple of years. So generally what you see in very high horsepower racing applications is guys will always spend the money, or gals, even people will spend the money to balance those things as close as you can possibly get them so that the engines live a long time at high RPM.
And here's something else someone's going to say too, is that you're going to have a lot of oil whipping around in there. So oil weight does play into the balance also. But here's what I always tell people is that if it's something that I can control, I'm going to make it as precise and accurate as possible, because obviously the oil, you can't control it, what's whipping around inside there. So yeah, people are like, well, it's only a couple grams here and a couple grams there. But yeah, I try to get as close as possible. I'm still keeping the piston squirters on mine. So there's going to be plenty of oil up underneath the piston. So you're going to have, obviously it's going to be different all over the place, but I can still control the balancing. So I'm going to balance it. And
I just look at it like, have you ever driven your car with the wheel weights out of balance? It's just a little bit. It's just a little bit.
Yep.
Right. But you feel the hell out of it, right? Well, imagine what's inside your engine. It's the same kind of thing. It's gotta be I don't think there's anything that you can do to really maximize the life of an engine in a racing application, but balancing would probably be the one thing that you could do that would extend its life significantly.
Yeah. My only engine I was ever in that was out of balance, someone got the wrong flex plate for a Ford. They have the two different weights for a 302
28 and the 60 ounce and the 50 ounce.
And they had the wrong one on it. We were driving down the road and it was just like I could feel it through the floorboards. And I was just like, what is that? And he drove it like that for 5,000 miles until it started knocking.
Yep. Yeah, it beat the main bearings right out of it.
Yep.
Okay, Michael Schmidt saying I have a NOS vintage aluminum flywheel for my flathead Plymouth. It's a Schaefer. It has center brass or bronze facing for the clutch. Anybody have experience with this on a street car?
None. I have no experience. I couldn't even answer that question.
I have no experience on it either, but I tell you what, I'd probably run that sucker. If it's made for that Plymouth, I would put it in there.
I would agree with you. So put it in there and go. Absolutely.
Let's see. Oh, you know what? It's already over 2 hours. This went by so fast tonight.
This one went by fast.
All right, and so Travis is out of here. He's saying he's got to hit his rack.
Good night, Travis.
Well, Nicholas R. says, in addition to wearing out the bearings faster, will bad harmonics play out a crank faster because it forces it to flex in less natural ways? No, especially if it's cast iron crank. They're pretty much a spring anyway, is what they are.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think it would do any damage to the crank itself. It might wear it weird on the bearing surfaces.
Yeah, you're going to see it in the bearing surface. So you're going to have different different marks on it, and it'll actually wear out the thrust bearing too much faster.
That it will do, and then you'll end up pitching your crank if it gets too far. Because if it gets into most bearings, that people don't understand this, but a Babbitt bearing is literally just like the surface of the bearing. They're all steel backed, right? So when you get far enough into the bearing material, it's now wearing against steel, and generally your crank is softer than that steel. So your next piece to get machined off is your crankshaft journals. So, all right. Well, hey, guys, that's it for another exciting Wednesday Tech Talk night.
I'll go one more. Michael Schmidt just popped one up there. Well, let's answer this one real quick.
Does the Slant 6, or on the Slant 6, does it use super long sausage pistons?
Yeah, super long.
4 rings like the Flathead 6 predecessor, or are the later OEM pistons more modern? Guys, great discussion. Thank you very much. Loved it.
No,
no problem.
They're long. They're really long, but they're definitely not like what you're thinking of. Because I've seen the Flathead 6. They're not that long. They definitely have 3 rings in them, but there is definitely nothing for modern day for those. Now Wiseco does make a piston, and there is an aftermarket piston like you can run, like I think it's a 2.2 turbo or something, or maybe it's a Chevy piston, but you have to run a different length rod because it raises the pin up in there. But then now you're getting into long rod problems. So yeah, it's not worth it.
Well, I'm certain that the pistons are probably about like all the Buick stuff. It looks almost like a tractor piston. It's a full skirted piston, right?
Yep. Yeah, it looks like a can essentially. It's only 3.4 bore and 4-inch stroke, so it's literally this long.
Yeah, it's just like them Buick pistons. Even the 455s were like that. Yeah, I call them a tractor piston, but I don't know. I've never seen anything else that has stuff like that.
Yeah, it'd be like a big tractor. So,
but,
all right,
yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, that's it for tonight's Wednesday night Tech Talk. Professor P and I will see you back here next Wednesday, 7 o'clock sharp. Sorry we ran a bit long. We got 4 minutes over, so we got some overtime in. And don't forget to stop by the AHRA eBay store and buy yourself some merch. My wife and I are going to be putting up the remainder of the merch that we had for the No Name Nationals up on there here soon. So if you are a participant for the No Name Nationals, or you want to be a faux participant of the No Name Nationals, you can get yourself a participant decal up there, 2 for $5. So
I got to get a shirt from you. You know, you guys were, you know, when we were packing up, getting ready to go, you guys were handing out trophies and stuff, and I never got a shirt. So I definitely want to buy a shirt from you guys. That'd be awesome.
Sweet, thanks. Yeah. John had the No Name National shirts.
Oh,
so he may still have them. I think you can get those from Schultz.
Okay.
So, all right. Well, we'll see you next week.
Yeah, you guys take it easy. And if there was a question we missed, we didn't get to, slantdailygarage@yahoo.com. Once again, slantdailygarage@yahoo.com. And I'll get to them. I just sent out the other one. So yeah, we'll take care of it. We'll see you guys next week.
See you next Wednesday.
Peace.